The Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte is meeting with King Willem-Alexander to discuss forming a caretaker administration. It comes after his coalition government collapsed amid disagreements over migration policy. Rutte's Conservative Party failed to reach a deal with the coalition partners on limiting the flow of asylum seekers into the Netherlands. An election is likely to be held in November. Well, Alistair Jones is Associate Professor of Politics at Montfort University here in the UK. Thank you very much for joining us. So, asylum policy extremely contentious in many European countries. Why has it, though, seemingly ended a government?
I think the issue is it's the volume of this migration coming into the Netherlands. So the numbers that were expected are way higher than what had been predicted. So last year there was something like 47,000 people entered the Netherlands. This year the prediction is 70,000. So there's an argument, okay, there's too many coming in, we can't cope with the numbers. Some of those who are applying for asylum are maybe not eligible, and we've got a slow process in getting those people returned. How do we deal with all of this? And the four coalition partners basically couldn't come to an agreement. They couldn't even come to an interim measure. So quite clearly, within the Dutch government, it was an extremely polarising issue. Two of the coalition partners saying we want tough measures, two saying, no, we've actually got a social obligation here to actually support all these people who are coming into the Netherlands. So the two sets of partners, if you like, couldn't get to an agreement, and the knock-on effect of that basically is the Prime Minister went to the King and saying, I'm sorry, we're going to have to dissolve the government.
So really tricky debates going on. Has this been in the making for a long time, or was this a surprise, this collapse?
I think it was a huge surprise. Immigration has been behind the scenes for quite a while, and we've seen the rise of the PVV, a far-right party who came third in the last elections to the lower house way back in 2021. But more recently, the big issue in the Netherlands has actually been about the government's plans to restrict some farming practices, the amount of nitrates being put into the soil. And that led to a huge farming protest and the creation of a farmer citizen movement called the BBB, which actually won the elections to the upper house earlier this year. So if there was to be a general election tomorrow, for example, it's expected that Rutte would probably still have the largest party, but that the BBB would be the second largest party in the Dutch lower house. So that's been the really big issue that has actually got a lot of people talking. Immigration had been falling off the radar to some extent.
So what actually happens now in the next few days? Who's going to be leading the Netherlands? The Prime Minister, Mark Rutte, or the outgoing Prime Minister, is going to meet the King to try and form a caretaker government. Is that likely to work?
This is going to be an interim measure in effect. So it's going to be a caretaker government, and the plan is going to be to call a general election in the autumn. Speculation is it's going to be early November. So between now and then, basically, the government, the ministers will stay in post, but they're not going to be introducing any new policies. It's just going to be ticking over more than anything else until we have the general election. And then as to who's going to win that, at the moment, all bets are off.
And so what are the implications for Dutch politics? Mark Rutte has been a really big player on the scene, one of the longest ever serving prime ministers in the Netherlands, I understand. What kind of legacy would he leave?
Well, he at the moment, the legacy is he is the longest-serving Prime Minister in Dutch history. The fact that he's been in power since 2010, so he's a fixture and fitting within, for example, the European Union, so all the summit meetings there, he has been there, if you like, from a British perspective, all through pre-Brexit, Brexit, and what's happened since. But within Dutch politics, what we've actually got is already a hugely complicated situation. There are 20 parties currently in the Dutch lower chamber. So what we've got is a hugely fragmented political system, and on top of that, that is exacerbated by the electoral system they use, which is quite a pure form of proportional representation. So if a party gets something like 1/3 of 1% of one vote, then they get a seat. So with that sort of fragmentation, it's going to be very difficult to see a cohesive long-term coalition being able to serve a full 4-year term actually being established in the future. The BBB have made it very clear that after the next election, they will not, under any circumstances, form a coalition with Rutte. They may with his party if he steps down as party leader, but they won't with him in post. So what we've got here is a hugely polarised situation, but within the two poles, if you like, massive splintering of different political parties, and it's basically unpredictable as to what's going to happen next. So I think trying to predict what's going to happen in Dutch politics between now and the general election, goodness only knows. And after that, gets even more difficult.
OK, well, great to get your thoughts, Alistair. Thank you very much indeed. Alistair Jones there, Associate Professor of Politics at Montfort University.